Hello and welcome to the latest panel discussion in the Distilling conference series titled Capital Distilling Spirits of London. I'm Tobias Gorn, and I'll be your host today. We are delighted to welcome some friends and industry legends, all distilling in the capital. We have Siobhan Feely from Sacred, Moses O'Donnell from Taxi Spirits, Braden Saunders from House Distillery, and Alex Wolpart from the East London Liquor Company with us. A great lineup. I'm hosting today for several reasons. One of them is our latest collaboration called the International Drink Specialist, where we help distillers, small producers to navigate in the treacherous waters of competition and awards. And as a collection of top global judges, we help to give feedback. And the main thing is, being an ex-Londoner, we just moved out of London after 15 years of fantastic times there, and it was indeed a lovely thing to go up in London. And well, you can figure out there's not a distinct Cockney accent. Growing up in London, I mean, it's working in the drinks industry and following all these gorgeous distilleries, these small, tiny distillers growing and growing, and there's many more opening, and it's a gorgeous thing to see. There's kind of diversity coming into the market and seeing new products, and having London is there's a French who makes gorgeous rums, there's the vermouth gin getting made, some nice whiskies, and plenty more. So kind of innovation and all this excitement coming from London, all this buzz for the last 15 years, to see it actually exploding in a very good way was absolutely fantastic. London was always a classic place for drinks brands, and London is technically the shopping window of the drinks industry globally. But recently, the last 10 years, let's say, we had many new distilleries popping up, and it's really good to have this small community feel coming back to London. We'll have one of my friends, Moses, later on talking to us, and it's a really good story. When we have a distiller friend in Kent, and I'm meant to be doing a gig for them, but I couldn't pick up the sampling stock. So this gentleman turns up later in a beautiful black cab, giving me all this distillers products to do on the show later on. And he said, like, Toby, by the way, here's a bottle of this and that. And I'm like, Jesus, this is Moses from Cabby's rum and Cabby's gin from the Taxi Spirits Company. And it's such a lovely thing to not to have just those big, huge brands, but actually exciting brands that are easy to relate. And meeting these people is actually fantastic. And Moses, thank you. We still owe you one for that.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. So first off, on our schedule, I'd like to have a tiny little introduction from our distillers here. We'll have a little conversation, and I will have some nice questions to ask. First is Siobhan on my lineup from Sacred Distillery of Highgate. And Siobhan, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. You are a favourite of ours for many years, and I've really followed the work as Sacred was growing. Alessandro Palazzi is a great friend, and what you're doing, and Sacred is amazing. So please tell us about yourself and how's Sacred nowadays.
I'd love to. Thank you for having me on. My name is Siobhan Feely, and I am a distiller and distillery coordinator at Sacred Spirits. I'm not at the distillery at the moment because the signal's terrible there, so I'm in the founder's new house without them actually being here. So you get to see the insights of their family home with me in it and not them. I've been distilling with Sacred for about 3.5 years. Beforehand, I was introduced to Sacred by working in one of the biggest gin bars at the time, the Oliver Conquest, and yeah, just fell in love with distillation and spirits via learning about Sacred. So yeah, I'm up here in North London, and yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Fantastic, and such a good location. We'll come back to you with the questions, but let me introduce our next guest, Moses O'Donnell from the Taxi Spirit Company. Moses, if you can tell us about yourself, because I really love your story and love your drinks, but well, I think it's better if you explain it than if I do, because I'm just a great fan, but it's more original if you tell us about yourself. So Moses, thank you for joining
So
us.
thank you so much. Thank you for having me. So my name is Moses Adong. I'm the founder of Taxi Spirit Company, which is basically a producer of London white rum, as well as spice rum. And as I said earlier, the emergency drink called gin. We were founded in 2018, but before that, I was a London taxi driver. That's my main occupation, if you want to call it that. And I embarked on learning how to distill. I got help from a lecturer from Harrow University. He basically taught me how to distill without the certificate, if you want to call it that. I had a small garage in North London, and literally everything was measured to scale. Everything was the height, everything was kind of perfect. And I learned under him for about a year, and then I spent a year going up to Dundee, where he set up consultancy and started setting up distilleries. So my first experience of commercial distilling was in Dundee for Ogilvy vodka, making potato vodka, which is one of the hardest things to make on the planet. I kid you not.
Absolutely.
But I done that, and then we started the journey of Taxi Spirit Co in 2018, and since then we're just moving from strength to strength, to be honest with you.
Fantastic, and thank you for joining us. It's all brilliant. We also have our next guest is Braden from the Dockhouse Distillery. And this distillery is also quite close to my heart because Braden let me use his parking space when I was working almost opposite in a Black Book winery, which is run by Sergio and Lindsay, my dear friends, and they never had a parking space at them. Parking space aside, Dockhouse is indeed a very exciting distillery. They're based in Battersea, and there are some pretty exciting things coming from them. So it's enough of me. Braden, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us about yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for the introduction. We're based here down in Battersea in South London, which is from the other guys on the crew here. You'll know that it's quite rare for anything to happen which is cool in South London. So that's kind of our first claim to fame. We're not from the northeast. But yeah, we started in 2016 down here in Battersea. As you'll know, Battersea's quite a raw industrial part of town. We love it. We chose it for that. We're pretty grungy type of people, no nonsense, sort of authentic people that sort of crack on with hard work. So Battersea for us really was a natural fit. And yeah, we started in 2016. As I said, we're a full grain to bottle distillery. So we have a 2,000 litre microbrewery on site, fermentation, and then distillation. And I guess our claim to fame is that we're the only distillery in London with a fractionating column. Well, as far as I know to this point. So yeah, we have a column, probably the most sort of famous distilleries similar in England are Chase and Adnams, I dare say, without getting in trouble. But we sort of went along those lines. It's a bit of a rod for our back. As Moses suggested, vodka is harder than people think to make. Not as sexy as many other things in the spirit game by any stretch. But yeah, we're pretty proud of the vodka we make. And then we also make a gin. We recently released an Aperitivo, which we've built off the Italian traditions in terms of its style. And we've just started a multi-grain whiskey, which we're obviously a long way from sort of getting out into the market, but we're pretty excited about that because it gives us something else to talk about than vodka and gin, which we all know on this panel is very, very saturated these days. So yeah, that's us. As you said, we're down in the estate there, and yeah, we love music and we hate council tax.
Oh, we're already firm friends. You know that. I think I was paying the same council tax for many years and didn't enjoy not getting anything out of it. But back to a serious topic about. You just said mine is a council tax because it's very serious and altogether useless. Gin and vodka are indeed saturated, and I love you all. You all make some sort of gin, I think, and some vodkas, and you're brilliant at that. And making a good vodka, actually, I think, at least as hard as making good gin. But on this panel, after Alex introduced himself, because he will need no introduction, we will talk about the other stuff that you're making, the next level. We want to be the kind of, London dry gin. We understand it's not a destination, it's a method. But, London and gin, it has a huge gin distillery there, which is actually 2 or 3, the big ones. Well, I really want to hear about, vermouth, exciting aperitivo, you're putting some whiskies, Cabby's rum, which is absolutely mind-blowing, brilliant stuff. And Alex has some pretty exciting things coming out of his company. So before we get into the deep end of the exciting and esoteric drinks of London, I would like Alex to say a couple of things about the East London Liqueur Company and his beautiful work there.
Thanks, Toby. So we've been here 7 years now, distilling whiskey and gin, vodka. We also import a couple of rums. It's been quite a journey here, kind of starting off very much on trade and working with all the local bars here and building our kind of business from that point. Whiskey, we've been, again, very, very lucky. We've been working with some amazing grain suppliers based out in Norfolk, and for the last 5.5 years, we've been grain to glass with our whiskey. We were brewing collaboratively with a brewery half a mile away down the canal, and we brought that in-house, and we've been releasing whiskies for the last 3 years. And then last year we started releasing some canned products as well, which have been great, particularly during lockdown when people are in the park and in need of something cold and easy and refreshing. So that's a kind of little overview.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. I've got a couple of very serious questions here, but what I would love to learn from you guys is if there's something that's if it's a product or a feel or a different approach, I would love to know, first of all, that what is the advantage of being in London, and what is a classic product? If London was a cru, if London was a designated protected origin, what would you think that your signature product would be? Shimon, can we start with you?
Yeah, I think the pros of distilling in a city, especially like London, where I'm from, I've grown up in London, is that you're kind of right in front of trends being built. You kind of see it about 5 years before everyone else outside London sees it, which is a massive advantage. So at the moment, we're seeing an influx, as Alex said, in RTD purchases. People want to be going to the park and actually seeing their friends and having something that's really easy to drink. The rise of, spritz market, we were kind of at the forefront of that, making our rosette cup, our bittersweet aperitif, and we were the first, obviously, London vermouth. So we've kind of seen a more growth when it comes to better drinking, lighter style drinking. You're here for a long time and a good time, rather than, having that high strength 20 gin and tonics in a day. I just think, in London you have, connectivity with people that you won't get in, the countryside.
Moses, can you tell us about your London story a little bit and the advantage?
I mean, for me being in London, I think London's the epicenter of everything, and being a London taxi driver, I appreciate London for what it is and the beauty that's got behind it. And if it came to the product, I'm gonna have to be biased and stick to rum, because it's something that people are still learning about. And it's, as I've always said, is rum's a language that people are just learning and getting to understand it just now. And the best way I can put it is, I think after lockdown, everything's going to change. People are going to be a lot more open-minded. People are going to be more experimental, because people have been at home enjoying their own cocktails, learning how to make cocktails, doing cocktail classes online. And it's I think it's going to happen. There's going to be a big boom in London for all products, to be honest with you. Because I think people are going to actually appreciate what they're drinking more, rather than just going and buying things and drinking it for the sake of it. People have actually been investing time and effort in researching and finding small brands that are out in London at the moment. There's quite a few of them out there.
If you're not a natural born bartender, or not someone who has to manage many bars and that sort of stuff, when you go into a nice restaurant or a bar, it's quite intimidating seeing 2,000 rums or not even coming up with, just quick rum cocktail. Oh, just give me a G&T, or like a glass of Prosecco, or ooh, Aperol Spritz, brilliant. Well, not exactly that what we expect. As in, ooh, that's an exciting signature drink to my little rum shack, or if I'm running the American bar in the Savoy. So, yeah, you're absolutely right, and I like the kind of if it's a local distillery, I presume there's a bit of that you give to the local community, even just you know, dropping a couple of boxes off for your mate, another mate.
I remember that.
Brilliant, and thank you to, you know, getting that rum vibe going, and with the local, there's plenty of exciting bars reopening hopefully soon, and keep that going. So I really like this idea of what you just said about London being an exciting place, seeing the trends faster than wherever you go, and it's really cool. Right, Alex, would you like to tell us about what's your take on that? What's the good side of London? What's that you
Well,
like
yeah,
about?
I was born in London, so I love London. It's a great place.
Me too.
Yeah, so it's a great place to have a home, but also a great place to work and build a business. I think for me, the wonderful thing about London is the kind of the diversity and the ability to have a kind of real open door policy for us to be able to welcome both, you know, visitors on tours, but also, you know, welcome our on-trade kind of customers come in to distill with us, to taste with us, to make drinks with us. To have that bar with a glass window where you sit at the bar, you have your martini, you look through the glass, it's all there. That's a kind of wonderful metaphor for us being as transparent as we possibly can be. And that's great, is, you know, we can really tell people, you know, get on the Central Line, it's 50 minutes from Oxford Street, and you're at Mile End, and up you come, basically. So that's the kind of lovely bit of having that access to such an amazingly diverse and creative on-trade. And yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, in terms of what's quintessentially London, I mean, we're very close to the old Lee Valley Distillery that shut, I think, about 115 years ago now. I'm sure David will correct me on that. It might be 114. But yeah, I think people don't really associate whiskey with London. And I think it's really, it's an important thing to sort of bang the drum and say, you know, we can make great whiskey, and it doesn't have to come from Scotland or Japan or Ireland. And the fact that we are in the middle of a city, yes, it poses some problems. Yes, we don't have fields of barley and rye behind our distillery, which does pose some logistical conundrums. But ultimately, it gives us an access to testing and developing a liquid which we're really excited about.
Actually, that's a really exciting point, because, you know, we work with many non-traditional, non-Scottish, and not even American whiskey makers through my work, and it's so exciting. So some people would say that, oh, that's you know, you can't make whiskey in the high Alps in Switzerland, or like, oh, whiskey from London, what a travesty, it should be gin. And I always say that, who are you kidding, kid? It's brilliant. And by the way, when they started to make gin in London some 100 years ago, David would know the exact number, then that was just something that came from the Dutch, and it was some crazy foreign liquid that became the biggest kind of UK English kind of staple of drinks. So I quite like the idea of everyone is trying to make different and exciting things. So as with rums, there's so many exciting rums are made in the UK now, and some of them are really outstanding quality. Some of them still kind of learning and getting better. So as vermouth, amaros, and talking of vermouth, amaros, and other stuff. Braden, would you like to tell us this? What you're working on, and what's happening, and how is it working in Battersea?
Yeah, so I'm sort of a similar view to Moses. Actually, I think there's an outstanding opportunity. I'm not born in London, as you can tell by my accent, but I think, you know, part of the beauty of London has always been its diversity, as Alex said. But I think that I guess for me, one of the hardest things about London is the size of it and the competition, not just, you know, between craft guys like us, I'm talking about, but bigger brands. And when London's 1,000 miles an hour, like it was prior to the pandemic, you know, little guys like us tend to get lost. Yeah, that is part education, but also part the fact that it's a transient city, and a lot of the bar trade is. So yeah, I'm sort of of the same view as Moses. I think there's an excellent opportunity because people have slowed down. They've you know, we've had Brexit, and no offense to Europe, and I don't even want to start that political discussion. But, you know, it's brought people more inwards. We all know what COVID's done. as far as people taking life a bit more seriously. And I think, you know, for little guys like us, that presents an opportunity because people have, you know, taken the time to work out, you know, what are the guys at Sacred doing that's different to everyone else, and they do some amazing things up there, the vermouth being one of them. You know, what's Alex doing with his rye? What's Moses making rum from scratch? And, you know, no offense to the rum industry, but there's a lot of guys just buying it and blending it. So I think, you know, is that better or worse? Not necessarily, but it gives you a reason to try both and to decide, and then to maybe drill into, you know, what makes East London rye different to Rittenhouse. You know, not just because it's owned by a massive company, Rittenhouse. And for me, that's it. And it's always come back to quality. You know, if I think Rittenhouse is better than East London, I'm giving you a few plugs here, Alex. Then I'm going to buy Rittenhouse, but actually I'm going to try both. And I think the biggest sort of error anyone can make is to focus on big brands, but also the other area is to say, well, if it's crafted, it's good. That's not true either. And, you know, what I'm seeing from a lot of bars that we're talking to now is that I'm seeing renewed interest for our products, not just in London, but in South London. People are coming to me and saying, you know, oh, cool, you're a distillery, never heard of you. And I wonder where they've been living, but they've never heard of us, but now they have. And that's because they've taken a look. And, you know, and I think that's fantastic. You know, I think geographically, actually each distillery on here, other than Alex and Moses, both in Mile End, is sort of positioned in its little spot. And the beauty of London is it's so massive that, you know, we have a local catchment, and really we focus locally. And in London, you know, we all know when you go out with friends, it's an absolute ball ache to get from the, maybe David's probably going to cut this bit out, to get from one side to the other. But, you know, so I think for us, it's actually really nice to see people coming in and actually bothering to give us a chance and pay a couple of quid more for some Doghouse spirits and all the guys on this setting, not just because it's better, but because it is local. And you know, by virtue of that, and there's a lot of talk about sustainability, but by virtue of that, it is more sustainable. So yeah, that's sort of my take on it.
It's fantastic, and if you just there's a little thing I was thinking when I build strategies, you know, what competitions to enter. And sometimes if a small Cornish distillery just comes to me, or you pick any corner of literally corner of the country, tiny little villages, not in a big town, and I always say that some local little competition would be really good for you, and because you need to start selling to the little bar next door first. You're not going to turn up to a national multiple and say that I've got a 200 litre still. Would you like to buy 30,000 units of me? Because you can't do it day or night distilling even for a year. But there's this locality, and I think with London you can have that local feel, and it's such a big unit, but it's so fragmented in a nicer, lovely way. It's small places that you can, if you start to be in all the bars in Battersea, then the big boys will start to put you in Savoy and Dukes and the serious places, big boys and girls. So yeah, absolutely. So it's quite funny because London actually has a local touch. My next question before we go to the London as a real brand, I would like to ask is more quick fire. What are the disadvantages being in the metropolis? Because we kind of a London panel today. I've got better questions too, but any kind of disadvantage, anything that you would maybe say that if I was slightly more out, as in geographically outside London, that could be better? Siobhan, would you like to start with that?
I think with any advantage, there's always going to be disadvantage. Going back to a point that I think Alex brought up earlier, that we don't have fields of wheat and we don't have, you know, fields of rye that we can frolic in and gather and forage wood sorrel in the magical forest. That's kind of a limiting factor for us. But it doesn't mean that the ingredients that we're using aren't incredible and organic and perfectly sourced. It's just we don't have that kind of video of us picking things, which is such a downfall. But I think another kind of downfall is the competition. You know, there are quite a few of us. I love the community, especially in gin and spirit making. We're always supporting every other distillery. I mean, I haven't been to Battersea yet because I live in East London and work in North, so I can never come all the way to Battersea because, as you said, it's a bit of a ball ache. But I used to live around the corner from, well, I grew up around the corner from East London Liquor Company, so that was always my favourite place to kind of go and discover new spirits and kind of be absorbed in that atmosphere. I think as well, kind of another negative is we do have that locality, which is great. I mean, especially in Highgate, everyone thinks it's this tiny village that isn't a part of London. But I think with brands that are outside London, they grab more of the locality. If you live in the back end of Winchester, you're probably going to tell all your friends and their friends that you love Twisted Nose. Or you live in the back end of Cornwall, you're probably going to drink Tarquin's constantly and not have any other gin because it's your local area and it's got a bigger catchment. Whereas my area would be kind of Highgate and North London, Alex being East London. It's just, yeah, I think the locality is more when you come out of the major city.
Thank you. That's absolutely clear. Brilliant. Moses, would you like to contribute to that, sir?
I think with London, London first of all is a very romantic place. No matter how you look at it, and everyone comes to London and they fall in love with it, or it falls in love with them. If it falls in love with you, you stay here longer, and that's how I'm looking at it. And when it comes to the localities side of things, I don't think there's that much of a disadvantage. I think just not everyone's gonna like your product. You know, not everyone's gonna enjoy it. But when you do find that little niche group of people that like it, they will love it and they'll celebrate you. So as you know, we're here at Taxperico, we're a very small batch. So we produce very small volumes of rum, produce very small volumes of gin. But the people that have found it from us have really appreciated it and they've celebrated it even more. So just take London in small meals. That's my thing with London. You know, if you just take little snacks there, and just it builds in your head, it gets better.
It's brilliant, especially coming from someone who had to do that big test, knowing all the streets of London. That knowledge test. I would not be able to get close to that. So thank you, Moses. You're brilliant as always.
Thank you.
Braden, the negatives of being in London. Not too negative, please. Just happy negative. Do you have any big disadvantages of being in Battersea? Would you reckon compared to if you were in the middle of somewhere else, anywhere in the country? Is there?
Well, as everyone's pointed out, we live here, so we're the biggest advantage is working close to work. Sorry, living close to work. But yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we love music and hate council tax. I think the biggest disadvantage to London, if that's what we're talking about, is rent and rates. But the flip side of that, to put a positive spin on it, is that across the globe, it's pretty easy to when you tell someone you're from London, whether you're from Battersea or North London or East or West or wherever you're from, London is London. It's a city that gets in your veins. I moved here for the first time in 2003. I took my first bartending job in Soho, in a cocktail bar in Soho that year. My brother told me to just put a black t-shirt on and some tight-fitting jeans and walk in with your Aussie accent and you should be sweet. So I did that, never worked in a day in a bar in my life, so I almost wanted to, jump out of a window at the end of my first shift. But it was exhilarating. The hospitality trade is a one of a kind across the planet. So when you couple that with London, to me being the greatest city on earth, you've got a pretty special industry. So, no matter how hard it gets for us, and the people on this panel know how hard it is always got that end of the day, you sit down and you have a few drinks with your mates and it's got that feel and that romance. So I think you know, despite all the hardships, which is inevitable in a big city, we'd all be complaining if we were in Tokyo or Manhattan or Hong Kong, or but we wouldn't be in London. And you know, so for me, I think yes, it's expensive, but you know, as I said, the flip side is we're here and people are willing to pay up for products. You know, if we go out into some of the regions, or we go into different parts of the world, you can't sell spirits like us because, you know, they cost us too much to make, and in order to get a margin, you're priced out. So yeah, I'm very, you know, I'm very happy we're here. Battersea is not really on the map globally. The power station redevelopment. Eventually, we're going to get a tube, which will be, you know, a miracle.
Finally.
People will actually want to come to Battersea for a change.
How do you make your brand Real London? How is the Real London brand actually in your understanding, instead of just saying that, you know, you're a brand that is connected somehow with London? Can you help me with that, because I think you've done a fantastic job with your brand there. And
thank you. Yeah, of course. I mean, I think, you know, London is this wonderfully vibrant, diverse city, and it's kind of, it's harnessing that and the energy of that and being able to articulate our brand story in the context of being in the capital city, and how we can harness our kind of we're really lucky to have these amazing brand advocates in the on and off trade who really help us grow and develop as a brand. And I think, you know, we took on a bit of a rebrand. We started it a couple of years ago, but COVID got in the way, along with many other things. And I think for us, it was just about trying to really pinpoint what the best articulation of what our brand message was about. You know, great booze for everyone, at great prices. And, you know, it's not very sexy to talk about price, and we try not to, but actually to be able to kind of take the word craft out. We've never really used it to talk about ourselves, but to try and steer clear from that aesthetically and from a language point of view, and not rely on it as a crutch, which some people do, to justify a very high price point. Not all, but to kind of really kind of dodge that point and be a little bit more inclusive and say, actually, what we really want to talk about is about being a community distillery. I remember a friend of mine coming to London from Germany a couple of years ago and said, Alex, you're even in the bloody fishmonger. And I was like, of course we are. We've embraced our local community, and they have a license, so they sell our gin. We're in the barbers as well if you get a haircut. And so, you know, really trying to kind of work with our local community first and foremost. You know, when we started 7 years ago, I was, you know, I had a bottle of gin in my pocket, and I was literally wandering from bar to restaurant to hotel to fishmonger, and sort of peddling our wares. And I think we really started in very, very small concentric circles. You know, there's still parts of London that we've never had the resource to kind of to sort of get stuck into. And I think for us, it's really about harnessing the local community. And I think when you talk about London as a brand, what's so wonderful is that we really see that the London brand on a micro scale in these lots of little villages like Siobhan in Highgate, you know, everywhere you go in Highgate, there's sacred, and that's absolutely right. You know, what's so lovely is that this kind of micro, small, village-like kind of community resonates on a global scale, and we've been really lucky to be able to then take that. And we've had lots of, you know, all the export markets that we work with are all people who have come to us and said, Alex, can we have some of your product, whether it's in Melbourne or LA or New York. And that's been such a wonderful kind of rewarding thing to have the small resonate to such an extent that it becomes a kind of on a very small scale, it becomes a bit more global. So that's a kind of wonderful thing, really.
You know, it's so nice hearing it, and it's so brilliant. And I agree to a certain extent that, you know, using craft or small batch and this and that, it could be useful to a certain extent, but I would rather have my shoes being handmade and bespoke than some other stuff. When we judge, and we judge at most of the competitions, it doesn't tell you that you only have 200 litre stills, or it doesn't tell you, it's a London Dry or a Contempt gin with a tiny bit of grapefruit, and that's it. And we don't care if you're the coolest guy, which you guys, you all are, and thank you so much for joining us, or you're basically just a computer with a very modern still making the same thing all the time. Doesn't really matter, as long as the connection is made to the customer and the quality of liquid is there. It's a total winning thing. And I think how you're doing it is, you're not riding the name just that London, Paris, New York, but actually become real London. I quite like that. I mean, Moses, remember your bottle, it's the barcode is part of a cab, isn't it? That's brilliant. I love that. So that is such a cool and easy way to use London and your background, and that's inside is one of those things that you see it and you see that that's actually real London. What do you think? Do you when you market your stuff, obviously because you have one of the most London jobs ever, being a London cabbie, which is absolutely brilliant, I think. Does it actually help you, or because we know that you're a highly qualified distiller and a real professional in that kind of way, but would that help with your brand identity and story that you were actually driving around London and serving the public in a beautiful and brilliant way?
I mean, it's helped quite a fair bit, because people are actually more shocked and stunned that when I told them, well, I'm producing rum in London and I'm a distiller. They say, "This, how did you link the two? How do you link the taxi and the distilling?" And I said, "This, well, for me, London's in a very special place in my heart. So if every time I could celebrate it and mention London, it will be the first thing that comes out of my mouth. You know, whether it's London taxi driver, London cabbie, London chef, London distiller, everything for me has to be London. You know, and it's just it's a happy place to be when I think about it. But how can I put it?
Absolutely.
The brand just I kind of fell onto it, to be honest with you, like where I connected the names and stuff like that. And I was playing around with names before, and then I said, you know, I am a cabbie, and we are known as cabbies. If you travel into London, you pick up someone from Paddington or wherever station, they say, "Hello, cabbie, can you take me to so-and-so? Can you take me to London Fields? Can you take me to London so-and-so?" They're just married together for me. And I never thought of this, actually, you know, how just to view it. Wow.
It's so brilliant how it came through, because you know it's quite funny. Some of our work is to look at a bottle, look at a liquid, and say that what's the connection between the bottle and the liquid. And sometimes I find it quite difficult, actually, not to tell someone that their liquid is not good, but when they have a marketing something that is a beautiful brand message, but it's nothing to do with the liquid itself, and you actually put it together so geniusly and such an easy and light design, but with everything it's just a really cool story. No nonsense, no not over the top, nothing. I mean,
even the story with the barcode, it came about. So we started designing the label during winter. And if anyone knows a black taxi does not go uphill. You know what I mean? If it's snowing, raining, like it doesn't go uphill. So the journey for me has been kind of been an uphill thing, like getting the license from HMRC and so forth, countless interviews for just the license. And I said, you know, I want the cab going uphill, because that's how I feel at the moment. And when I gave it to the designer, they said, okay, this is different. I said, yeah, there you go. That's how the barcode came about. Because it's been an uphill journey.
And I really love what you're doing, and I can only say congratulations and keep it going, because you're one of our favorites. Absolutely brilliant. Right, Siobhan, I want to this London brand, because to be absolutely frank with you, I tried Sacred back in the days first, when I was growing up in the industry and trying to try new stuff and realize there's more than the big brands, and it you know, probably after 2008, 2009, they were like, oh, Sacred. And it took me some time, actually, just to the penny to drop that. Actually, this is a London brand. And shame on me, I was living not so far from Highgate at that time. And then just to realize that, oh, Jesus, these guys are literally a mile away from here. So how is the London brand and kind of London feel coming through in Sacred?
Well, London's a massive thing for us. So Ian obviously grew up in Highgate, started the brand in his house. I mean, 10 minutes from where I am now. We now have a shop in a very historic high street in Highgate. I think London's such a massive thing. We were the first, I think we were like a week before Sipsmith by getting our distiller's license. So we were like the first London gin brand. And yeah, we kind of pride ourselves on being from London. London is, growing up here, is the coolest city I've ever been to in my life. And you're forever, even when you're from here, discovering new and exciting things. And I'm always really excited to hear what's coming out in the booze world. I'm really excited to hear there's another aperitif and some whiskies, and you know, there's some and a London rum, which I've always wanted to do, and I'm glad that someone finally done it. So yeah, I think it's just London is the place where you create, where you thrive, and where brands can really come up with some cool stuff. And yeah, I think for Sacred's sense, we always want to innovate, and yeah, be kind of leading that in London, and then branching outwards. So I think we are in the lucky position to be one of the forefront of a lot of brand identity. You know, first London gin, first vacuum distillery, first London vermouth, first London bitter aperitif, first I think that's what our first, and you know, winning numerous awards for those products. It's quite
fantastic. Yes.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I didn't mean like that the Sacred is not London enough, but
No.
exactly, it's a slightly more mature brand than the rest, and not in a good and not in a bad way. It's just how the brand is in its lifetime. Obviously, you had a tiny bit more time with Sacred there than some of the rest here. And in my head, it's kind of one of those new classics. You know, when you go around and see that sort of, well, it's not something, oh, it's exciting and new. It's like, wow, this is high quality and there's something there. Especially when my friend Alessandro told me that I would always torture him, like, oh, where's the lemon from? Where's the gin from? Where's your vermouth from? And it's like, oh yeah, it might be an English vermouth. So like, what's wrong with this? It's an Italian man making English vermouth. That must be bloody good. And it is. It's fantastic. Such a good story and such a fantastic achievement. And I really love the story and what you're doing there. It's absolutely fantastic. Right, Master Brian, being in London, obviously there's ups and downs, but I think Dog House had a perception of the brand is pretty brilliant. It's quite obvious, but probably perhaps out of all of you, there's the least kind of, there's no London stamp on it. Obviously, there's no London in the name. How did you come up with the brand, and can you tell us a tiny bit about that, because I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, so funny story actually, but I won't go into that today because it'll bore everyone to tears, which I'm good at. But the quick story, and I always get asked this, people always think we're Doghouse because of the dogs and cats home, and they obviously haven't spent a night out with me. But basically, the short answer is, you know, I pretty much end every night in the doghouse, and so it was a natural, it was a natural thing. And then people asked me, well, that's, you know, that's a bit naughty, or that's a bit this and that, and we kind of have to explain that you know, the doghouse for us is a place where we feel free, uninterrupted, and you know, we're normally inebriated, of course, but yeah, it's, so for us it's an expression. We when you are in the doghouse, there is no tomorrow, and you know, we've all got hard jobs and we've all got lots of things to do, but I think the ultimate thing about having a night out is the release. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it came into play, you know, and honestly, it just popped into my head. And for so much of my life, people had said, I'm in the doghouse. It was just a natural thing for us to call it that. One thing that is a little bit confusing, and you rightfully pointed that out, is that our brands aren't called Doghouse. We purposefully chose that tack because we're inspired by music, so everyone has to have some inspiration, you know, in order to come up with a brand or an idea. We love music. We love all kinds of music. I always say to people, if I had to go to a deserted island, and I had to take one thing, I always say to be music, even over booze. And for the people that know me, they say that's you'd take booze. But you know, I like to try and pretend that I'd take music. But yeah, they're pretty close in terms of they're intertwined. I think if you're drinking and you're not listening to music, I probably don't want to drink with you. And if you're listening to music and you're not drinking, I probably don't want to be with you either. So for us, it's very, you know, in that sort of zone. We chose to go against traditional sort of, you know, labels and that sort of thing, because it's not us. People, you know, they always ask me what's with the labels. You know, the labels are an expression, like any artwork, and whenever someone's an artist, if they sat around thinking about what people would think of them when they produce something, then they probably will produce nothing. You know, so for us, we produce unique labels. We hope to produce unique liquid. You know, and then in time, we hope to enjoy a few nights in the doghouse with our customers, and that's our core ethos. And it's a little bit racy and a little bit edgy, and not everyone's. I admit it's not everyone's cup of tea, but you know, we're here for a long time, and we're here to express ourselves, and yeah, we're slowly building a following, which is very organic and is a similar culture.
Well, it's fantastic, and I think that's just something that we can't trump. That you can't say a better end this lovely conversation. And before you go, I would love to thank everyone very, very deeply, because it was really lovely to see you all. I personally love all the work that you're putting in, and totally different people with different products, but still the location and this good positive attitude, it makes it fantastic and special to talk to you all. Very inspirational. We'll have a live Q&A that time, but for now I think that's it, and thank you again for being amazing and being a Londoner. Thank you so much, guys. See you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.